Well, let's hone in on that story now. The NPA's application to approach the Supreme Court on Judge Phillip Loubser's decision to rule Moroadi Cholota's extradition from the US has been dismissed. Ziniko Mhlaba is in Bloemfontein for us, tracking that story. And perhaps a good idea just to give our viewers some background to the story, Ziniko. Moroadi Cholota, the former PA to former Free State Premier Ace Magashule, she would have been part of the accused in the asbestos corruption case alongside Ace Magashule and several others.
That is correct, Michelle. Actually, the involvement of Mr. Cholota on these particular matters just started after she had appeared before the Zondo Commission, where she was invited to testify before the then Deputy Chief Justice Raymond Zondo. And following that, there was a letter that was sent to her as she was still in the USA pursuing her studies. And of course, the first approach the state, used in terms of trying to interact with her, they had approached her citing that she might be, one of the state witnesses. And of course, after the first interaction with the NPA, and of course, Ms. Cholota then, according to reports, failed or refused to implicate individuals on facts she was not aware of. That's when then the attitude of the NPA towards her changed, and then now she was approached as a suspect. That's how she was linked to the asbestos matter. And of course, what we understand to have been the core of the argument or her involvement was that the core of the involvement of her in this particular case, it was in her capacity as a personal assistant to the then former premier of this particular province, as she was a personal assistant. So the NPA or the state at the time wanted to understand what exactly was happening through the bursary schemes, and of course the involvement and the transactions that were happening from the office of the premier on the matters we are dealing with today. And that's when it all started for her. However, then there were several attempts which were made by the state to try to bring her back to South Africa. I understand 6 times they tried, and obviously in the very last time, that's when they added new information which then described Ms. Cholota as someone who was a fugitive, but also someone who has links, in Kenya. That's when the USA authorities decided to really grant that extradition. That's when she came to South Africa, and of course she was here to face, to start with the trial proceedings. However, when they were supposed to start with those trial proceedings, that's when she raised the issue of how she was brought back to South Africa, citing that, the manner in which she was brought back to South Africa was unlawful. And then that's when we got to that trial within a trial, which we know now that she won that case. Then the NPA decided to challenge that decision of this very same court in terms of acquitting her or releasing her, by stating that this court does not have a jurisdiction over her. So today, both legal teams argued and made their presentations in terms of what are their issues with the decision of the High Court, which was released, handed down last week, when the court said that she is free to go because this court does not have jurisdiction over her. And where we are right now, we know now that the court is upholding its position and, of course, is denying, the state that opportunity to approach the Supreme Court of Appeal on this matter. But I'm joined now by Mr. Piet Lemaro, who is the legal representative of Ms. Cholota, to give us a context of what does this mean now and what is the future of Ms. Cholota on this particular case. But there were also some concerns raised by the state when it comes to how they've been portrayed in the media by the legal representative, which are part and parcel of this litigation. But you also have some concerns in terms of how the NPA has handled the issue of interacting with you as legal representative, especially when it comes to exchanging papers, which are meant to be part and parcel of what we're dealt with here today.
It is clear that the manner in which the state has dealt with this matter, the intention was basically to deal with this matter in a manner that will not be ready when we come to this court. We were only served with the papers only yesterday at about ~2, and we expected to respond before the court closes. And one can tell that their intention was that we won't be able to respond before the close of court yesterday. But surprisingly, we were able to do so. And that's why we are here today. And that's not the manner in which we ought to deal with each other. They have been long aware on the 3rd, and they mentioned on the 4th of this month that they are going to appeal this matter. One, it begs the question as to why we were only served with the document only yesterday and we expected to be here today. But in any event, we are here and we have seen the judgment. But we are not surprised with the outcome. We have long been aware that the manner in which our client was extradited was unlawful. It's a settled law that the power to request an extradition or for someone to be extradited lies with the executive. So we believe that now the time is ripe for the NPA to take accountability. To an extent that they cannot do that, they need to leave our client alone.
I mean, talk to us about, I know you have not consulted with her just yet about the next step, or if you have, you can maybe let us in terms of what is her future right now on two things. Firstly, is she going back to the USA, but also in the broader context of the asbestos case, what is the future right now? As an advisor to her legally, what would you advise her to do right now? Should the NPA somehow find a way of bringing her back to the main case that this court is dealing with? What are the chances of that?
It will be an insurmountable task for them to find any way. To an extent that they have a way of finding it to bring it back to the matter. Let them do so, but I believe that it's extremely insurmountable. One thing that you must know, the manner in which they have dealt with our client, they violated their constitutional rights. And obviously, we need to consider what are the options in as far as that is concerned.
The issue of how she was brought back to South Africa has been publicly shared, and as you just explained, that was your core argument in terms of getting her winning these two legal battles with the NPA. But when it comes to the actual charges, which the other suspect in the asbestos case are faced with, do you think there's really nothing to answer from her side as far as those questions and allegations and charges, besides the issue of how she was brought back to South Africa? Besides that, does she have questions to answer in the broader case of the asbestos?
She has no question to answer. One thing that you need to understand is as follows. The asbestos tender, it was between Human Settlement Department and the respective companies. She was employed at the Premier's office as a personal assistant. How can she influence the tender in another department that she doesn't work for? Even if she was working for that department, she cannot influence the tender. There were people who were responsible for that. And in any event, she was working for Premier's office. So she had nothing to do with the tender in asbestos-related issues. So there's no way that she will have a know-how on how that has happened. The only thing that she was dealing with is it was at the Premier's office in as far as the bursary issues. Nothing that has to do with asbestos.
I mean, would you support her or advise her to take some legal action against the state for being implicated, being arrested, being brought in South Africa, but also serving some time in custody? Do you think this is the right time or something to consider going forward after winning this particular latest battle?
Yeah, definitely we'll need to do that. And not only that, she was brought in a manner that with an intention to embarrass her. She spent close to 4 months in Maryland, in America. And in South Africa, she spent close to 7 days. So we need to consider what are the options, but we're going to consult with her and decide what is the next step.
Okay, so from now onwards, what's the next game? What's the next step as far as her presence here in South Africa, but also as her personal life? She was still studying in the US. What's going to be happening between now until next year when the asbestos case is back in this particular court?
In as far as her studying in the US, she was being funded by the provincial government, and they've since withdrawn the funding. Perhaps we might need to consider and see whether they will be willing to say, if they want to accept that the manner in which they have handled it was unfair and was incorrect, and if they are willing to fund it, maybe she will consider going back. But it's not something that she has discussed with us. But provincial government was funding her. They've since withdrawn the funding, and she's unemployed. She's in South Africa. We still need to consult in as far as what is the next step and whether she's going to remain here or she's going to go and be somewhere.
Okay, sir, let me release you to my other colleagues. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much there. So, Michelle, that's the situation here. Ms. Cholota's team is definitely not happy with how the NPA has been handling this matter. So I think now it will be very important to get reactions from the NPA in terms of what is their next step now as far as this matter is concerned. But some insightful information coming out of my engagement with her that they are planning, or the legal team is going to advise her to take some legal action against legal actions against the state, but also that she remains in South Africa because she's no longer studying in the US because she was being funded by the provincial government, and that is the situation. So we will have to then wait for the actual resumption of the main trial next year when the court, this particular case, it deals with this matter of the asbestos, which was worth over 200 million. So that's where we leave things for now on this particular matter. Ms. Cholota again wins against the state.
Ziniko, Mhlaba, thanks very much indeed. And yeah, when Judge Phillip Loubser handed down the decision at the beginning of June, the NPA said it was still certain it would not affect its trial involving Ace Magashule.